What is it which unites Kevin and Colin and Pauline and Sharon and Colleen, all the public servants we've applauded on this stage today? I think, conference, we know the answer. I think we saw it in those films. It is the moral cause of public service. And it is also our moral cause as a party. The thing which brought so many of us into politics was that commitment to social justice, that belief that every child has the right to be safe and happy, but also to fulfill their potential to the full. But that secondly, there should be no barrier too great to overcome, whether that's where you live, or the occupation of your parents, or your disability, or your special educational need. There should never be any barrier too great to overcome if we together, through our collective endeavour, are prepared to break down the barriers and say we will give opportunities to every child. That is the vision of our children's plan. That is, I believe, our commitment to social justice. And I think, as a conference, as a party, as a government, we should be proud of the way in which, over 12 years, we have turned a moral purpose into direct action. If you think back to 1997, there were, in our country, no Start children's centres. There was no free nursery care. We all know, though, Yvette and I know, all of you know how hard it is to balance work and family life, how hard it is to do what we want, which is to give our children the best start in life. But we now have mums and dads who get the financial support they need in order to be able to be with their child in the months after their birth. We now have free nursery care for 3- and 4-year-olds, and now extending to 250,000 2-year-olds as well. We now have the short breaks for thousands of families with a disabled child who have desperately needed those short breaks, and support for the relationships of families under pressures too. But most importantly of all, we now have in our country, 12 years on, over 3,000, and set by next March to be 3,500 Sure Start children's centres, one for every community, a new and universal pillar of our welfare state delivered by this Labour government. And we know too that in 1997 we had one of the lowest staying on rates at 16 of any developed country. But it is because we want to make sure that every child and young person can succeed that we now have 225,000 young people this year starting an apprenticeship. And we also have a school or college or training place for every young person leaving school and starting this September. But we are also legislating so that for the first time in our history, education to 18 will be a universal right for every young person in our country. What was, for 100 years or more, the dream of the labour and cooperative and trade union movement, now again being delivered in this 21st century by this Labour government. And as we heard from the speakers from the floor earlier, it is really important that we think back and remember what we campaigned to change 12 years ago in 1997. School buildings with roofs which leaked and classrooms where the children were cold, children studying with photocopied textbooks, a teaching profession demoralised, and over half of all our secondary schools not making the grade. That was Tory education policy. And 12 years on, over 4,000 schools newly built or fully refurbished. Per pupil funding more than doubled. 42,000 more teachers, and now the best paid teachers we've ever had, and 183,000 teaching assistants too. And not over half of our secondary schools, but now less than 1 in 10 of our secondary schools not making the grade we want them all to get to by 2011. That is what has been delivered by a Labour government. That is putting our moral purpose into direct action. But we know not everybody agrees with this. Michael Gove says our state schools are failing. He says the only reason that exams are improving, our exam results are improving, is because the exams are getting easier. Michael, stop running down the achievements of our young people and the hard work of teachers in our schools around the country. And let me say too, and unlike the Tories, we will not break our promises on pay and conditions to teachers and head teachers. That is why we are determined that teaching will be a profession on the same level of esteem as lawyers and doctors, with continual professional development, and we will keep reducing the workload so that teachers can get on and teach in the classroom. But the only way we can do that is through the hard work and endeavour of our teaching assistants and all the other people, the caretakers and cleaners and cooks, who make such a difference in our schools day in, day out, all around the country. And that is why I am determined to support our new support staff negotiating body, and today with new resources so they can do the work they need to do to raise the training and recognition and esteem of all the support staff in our schools all around Britain. And I would like to pay a particular tribute, and following Mary Turner, who spoke earlier, to all the catering staff too in all our schools. It is their campaigning and the work of the National Policy Forum and the GMB Union and Unison, and also our party members, which mean that now, this September, our pilots in Newham and in County Durham are delivering free school meals for every child. But we know too that teachers play a hugely important role of leadership in trust in our communities for our children. And that is why it is really important to me that I am working very closely with our teachers to say there is no place in a civilised society for bullying of any kind, whether that's on the ground of race or disability or sexual orientation too. And it is also true that there is no place in our schools for racism either. And that is why I have asked the former Chief Inspector of Schools, Mr. Morris Smith, to look at the evidence, to make recommendations. I want us to know that we have all the powers we need to stamp out racism and BNP activity in all of our schools. I'd like to say a big thank you to Kath Spate and the Policy Commission for all their advice and the debates we've had over the last year. I'd like to thank too the brilliant ministerial team I have, Vernon and Dawn and Kevin, Delith, Diana and Ian, who are all here today. We all know that we've made progress, but there is a lot more to do to break down all the barriers we need to break down so that every child can succeed. There is more to do. That is why we are uncompromising in saying we will raise standards in every school. And that is why we are working hard with our National Challenge Trusts, our cooperative trusts, and our Academies programme to do as we break the link once and for all between poverty and attainment. And it is also the case that if a child falls behind, they need the extra support to catch up. That is why we will deliver the one-to-one support they need, and also the extra help and support for children with a special educational need. And because parents want to know, they want to know how their child is doing and how their school is doing, I won't abolish, we will keep tests in Year 6, but we will add to that a new report card so that for the first time in our country, schools will be fairly judged and compared across all that they do, and also that we give parents all the information they need about our primary and secondary schools. But parents also say they want an orderly school with a strong head teacher where the discipline is tough and so the children can get on and learn. And the Prime Minister and I, we went to see a school today in Hove where they were doing exactly that with the highest standards of behaviour. That's why Vernon Coker and I, the Schools Minister and I, are today announcing we will set a new behaviour challenge to ensure that behaviour is good in every school, but also that we will back head teachers to enforce discipline, but we will also say to parents, all of us too must back our teachers to use the powers they've got to enforce discipline so every teacher can get on and teach and every child can get on and learn in the classroom. But we know too that we are going to have to break down these barriers to deliver these goals in what will be tougher times. I think we all know that we have gone through in the last year the biggest global downturn for, well, certainly for a very long time. And we know that without the leadership of Gordon Brown and Alistair Darling, our country and the world would have slipped from recession into depression, and we thank you for that leadership. But we are determined to take the tough action we need both to secure the recovery and to make sure that we keep the deficit coming down. And we have said that those with the broadest shoulders should bear the heaviest burden on taxation, and that is right. But we've also said on spending, we will have to find the efficiency savings and the value for money which will be necessary to make sure we can keep delivering for our frontline priorities. But let us be clear, we will not cut Sure Start or tax credits or threaten child benefit. That is David Cameron's plan. And we will not deny school leavers the school or college or apprenticeship place this September, or cut our school building programme in order to spend on an unfair and unfunded free market Tory education experiment. That is Michael Gove's plan. But do you know what surprised me most this summer? It wasn't Michael Gove agreeing with George Osborne that the right thing to do this year would be to cut the schools and Sure Start budget. It wasn't Michael Gove again running down the achievements of our young people. It wasn't Michael Gove saying publicly the Conservatives would not back our free school meal pilots. I have to say, none of that surprised me at all. After all, he is a Tory. I'll tell you what surprised me. It was when he said in August that a Conservative government would exclude all vocational qualifications and diplomas from school-by-school comparisons in league tables under a Conservative government. I have been to so many schools over the last 2 years and met a head teacher who has said, come with me to see the construction class or design or sport or dance, and then boasted that those subjects have inspired young people to learn, and that is reflected in higher grades in those subjects, but also in English and maths too. But Michael Gove says those are soft subjects which should be ignored and discouraged. I say, what kind of schools does he visit? How can he say our young people studying vocational qualifications in our state schools should be second class? Our aim should be to break the old historic divide between first-class academic qualifications for some and second-class vocational qualifications for the rest. But Michael Gove wants to entrench that divide. He wants to turn the clock back to those bad old days. I say we should say loud and clear, we will not cut schools in Sure Start. We will not impose cuts on frontline services, which would mean fewer teachers and teaching assistants. And we will not prioritise an inheritance tax cut for a few, paid for by cutting investment in our children's future. That is the Tory plan, and we should fight it every day from now until the general election. And as for the sun, we know what's going to be said. It was said 17 years ago. Will the last person to leave please turn out the lights? Things have changed since then. Ed Miliband's been telling us all to do that every day. Conference, we know the truth. The truth is that when public spending gets scaled back, we know which communities suffer. If unemployment becomes entrenched, we know which constituencies pay the greatest price. If some children only can succeed, then we know which children will be held back. And the reason why our party campaigned so hard to win in 1945 and 1964 and 1997 is because we had seen the reality of a Tory government. Our predecessors, they saw what mass unemployment did to scar communities in the 1930s. In the 1950s, they saw the young people denied the chance of a university place. And then we all lived through the Thatcher major years, 18 years, years in which child poverty doubled, in which youth unemployment soared, and in which public services were cut back to the bone. We have seen a Tory government. So I say to anybody who asks, is this a fight worth fighting? Let us not learn that lesson the hard way again. We don't need opposition to remind ourselves why we need a Labour government. It is going to be a hard fight. We are the underdogs. But in the coming months, when you're out on the doorstep, on the phones, talking to voters, delivering leaflets, remember what is at stake in this election. 3,500 children's centres, that is what is at stake. Still 2 million children living in poverty, that is what is at stake. Our plan to rebuild every secondary school in this decade, that is what is at stake. Education to 18, the future of our country, that is what is at stake in this election. Because there is only one party which can get us through this downturn, and that is our party, the Labour Party. There is only one party which will prioritise investment in education for all, and that is one party, our party, the Labour Party, and there is only one movement whose commitment to social justice is so deep in its core that even in difficult times we will prioritise investment in the NHS and support for pensioners and keep reducing child poverty, and that is our movement, the Labour movement. That is why I say this is the most important general election of our generation, and we have to have the confidence to go out there and fight it. It is going to be a hard fight, but together let us win for the future of our country. Thank you.